This video is sponsored by Pacific Coast Sleep. Looking for a new mattress? Pacific Coast Sleep is a personable, privately owned business that delivers locally and ships around the US, offering a variety of bed types and brands, including MLILI, Maxim, Seahawk Design, Futon Pillow Design, and more. Mention my name, Matthew Richards, to get 50% off your purchase. Ask about free delivery. Links in the description below. Carnival Cruise Line's fantasy class fun ships are a lot like a root beer float, or in this case, a Coke float. Relatively inexpensive, probably not the healthiest option for you, but you know you're coming back for more. And doesn't that explain Carnival as a whole, really? I'd argue that it's safe to say that Carnival Cruise Line's branding, business practices, and affordability factor plays a big part in the reason why the cruise industry as a whole is the way it is today. But that might be a little too safe to say even. What if instead I said that it's safe to say that Carnival Cruise Lines is a big reason why our, at least American culture, is the way it is today? Which higher up was it who said that Carnival Cruise Lines is proud to be called the Walmart of the cruise industry because of their affordability factor and customer satisfaction? For the life of me, I couldn't seem to find the quote, but I know it's there. They have become famous and infamous. They've become so powerful that they've succeeded in owning a good majority of the cruise industry, including 9 major cruise lines. Like many now famous YouTubers, Carnival started early, from converting ships meant for passenger service into resort fun ships, to generating the means and money to build their own quirky line of floating resorts altogether. But let's go back to the Walmart of the Seas connotation these ships in particular have had. For as long as I can remember, the Carnival Fantasy class line of ships have always been known to be the loud, eccentric, unventilated, lowbrow, flashy, tacky, plastic, floating Las Vegases of the sea. My first cruise ever was aboard the Carnival Paradise, the 8th and last ship of the Fantasy class fleet. While there was a lot I enjoyed and was even impressed by, the early 90s Las Vegas style decor still made my head spin for weeks after the cruise was over. And within the past several years, the Fantasy class ships have indeed shown their age. When we found out that at least several of them would be scrapped, a good majority of regular cruisers actually saw it as long overdue. But another good majority were super sad to see them go. So why are so many, including myself, so sad to see these ships go? Could it be because their lives were cut short by the global pandemic of 2020? I think that without a doubt plays a big part in it. In my tribute video about the late Royal Caribbean Sovereign class ships, I talked about how the Carnival Fantasy, though being the oldest in her class, very recently went through an extensive refurb back in January of 2019. So that was definitely a loss for the cruise line. But there's more. And in today's video, we're going to dive into how much more. Today, we will be talking about the anomaly that is Carnival Cruise Line's Fantasy class fun ships. Hello, my name is Matthew and welcome to my channel, where I attempt to make our current situation just a little more seaworthy. The goal of this channel is to immerse fellow passengers like yourself aboard fabulous ocean liners you otherwise cannot sail aboard because alas, they are gone to history, or in this case, on their way to becoming gone to history. So let's hop aboard these late great fun ships of Carnival for a much needed getaway. No, not that getaway, but we're on the right track. In July of 2020, 5 iconic cruise ships rammed into the scrap-torn beaches of Aliaga, Turkey for their first and last time. 2 of them were Royal Caribbean's original Sovereign and Monarch of the Seas, later converted to become simply the Sovereign and the Monarch by Royal Caribbean's subsidiary cruise line based in Spain, Pullmantur. The other 3 were, you guessed it, Carnival Cruise Line's 1989 to 1998 Fantasy class fun ships, Fantasy, Imagination, and Inspiration. The Fascination was close to being the next in line to go, but was saved at the last minute by a buyer in the Asia-Pacific region who plans on giving her a similar life to that of Cunard's legendary Queen Mary in Long Beach, California, and the Queen Elizabeth II in Dubai. Why were these ships, as there were 8 in the series, chosen to be scrapped? Well, the last remaining 3, the Elation, Ecstasy, and Paradise, were fitted with 106 additional balconies more than the 52 that they were originally built with. That's my theory anyway. And I don't think I'd be the only one to say that these added balconies aren't the most aesthetically pleasing. At least most of them. The deck of balconies they added above the sports deck, I think, are surprisingly sleek and contemporize the ships very nicely, and they're clearly keeping them alive. Okay, but why is it sad to see these ships go? Growing up, Carnival has always seemed more reachable to me than Royal Caribbean and most other cruise lines, and a lot of it probably has to do with the affordability factor. The 4-day Mexican Baja Funship cruise I took aboard the Paradise back in 2005 was a total of $607.76. And when I looked to see how much the same cruise would cost on the Imagination or the Inspiration shortly before the pandemic struck, about 15 years after my first cruise by the way, I was really surprised to see that the prices didn't change all that much. When I looked up a 4-night cruise on the Majesty of the seas around the same time, I didn't understand why it was so much more expensive in comparison, when considering that it was an older ship. As old as the Carnival Sensation, as a matter of fact. Although maybe the requirements of the itinerary had something to do with it. Usually, more affordability means more people are going to be able to travel, which means more memories, and hopefully fond, happy memories. But more than that, the interior design choices are definitely up for a lot of debate.
I'd call some of the design early 90s on a good day and garish on a bad day. But I still appreciate an atrium that reaches to the sky.
However, we must admit that the Shakespeare Library is kitsch done right, which I promise will be the last time I mention the decor by saying just why.
I know you weren't going to comment on the decor anymore, but am I allowed to?
No. And I suppose, at least it's playful.
While I've heard the exterior described as resembling that of a milk carton, there's no denying that these profiles have all the whimsical excitability that earns them the name Fun Ships. Start out with a clean, classic, traditional hull and add a bunch of quirky and, if I may qualify, original features. Like the long inlaid balconies cut into a large portion of the hull along upper deck, containing the grand suites. The large melodic windows that curve with the shape of the theater lounge at the very front of the ship. The boxy 3-deck high extension that provides forward and aft views of the ship, whether in the likes of Carnival Boulevard or outside 1 deck above on the Lido. There is a perfect balance between classic symmetry meeting eccentric symmetry, in my opinion. And that eccentric design comes with an eccentric history. Carnival Cruise Lines began in eccentric 1972 by a man named Ted Arison and has since been based out of eccentric and aqueous Miami, Florida. The first 3 ships, the Mardi Gras, Carnival, and Festival, were originally built and operated by Canadian Pacific Lines, which operated from 1887 all the way up till 2005 for transatlantic travel. They were ocean liners. And oh boy did they renovate. Nahal Ayed was very daring when he designed the Sovereign of the Seas back in 1988. But so was Joe Farkas, who started designing fun ships for Carnival as early as 1975. Eccentric 1975. Carnival became so successful that they were able to build their own ships in the 1980s, with famous celebrity representation and iconic attributes that made them a staple in, at least American culture, like the red, white, and blue color scheme uniquely shaped on the iconic whale tail smokestack, which was originally made to resemble an airplane wing, associating the cruise line with fast and efficient travel, and symbolizing the peace and even collaboration between the airlines and the cruise lines, which had some very shaky relations for a while. Practically, the funnels were also shaped this way to allow exhaust to exit the ship out and away through the sides to ensure guest safety no matter what. If you saw my last video, you'll know that the SS France turned Norway was one of Royal Caribbean's biggest rivals as well as inspirations. Well, they weren't the only ones. Joseph Farkas inspired the iconic Carnival funnels after that of the ex-France, but made them all their own, resembling more of a whale tail. This is when they really started forming their identity with a full line of an almost completely identical class of ships, including the Tropical, Holiday, the Jubilee, and the Celebration. Add a popular TV host and musician Kathie Lee Gifford to the brand, and you become a pop cultural icon that keeps up with the competition quite nicely indeed. As Senior Vice President of Sales and Marketing for Carnival Cruise Lines, Adolfo Perez put it, our soul is, we're fun, we're casual, we have a good time. Anybody can have a good time. Whatever kind of fun. Obviously, over the years we've stayed true to that and also to the value proposition. Ain't we got fun? In 1988, probably their greatest rival, Royal Caribbean, came up with some ideas that would change the cruise industry forever, with You guessed it, 3 very innovative and iconic marvels of the sea. The beautiful and futuristic Sovereign-class megaships. The biggest, non-repurposed cruise ships of their time. I don't doubt this wasn't at least part of Carnival's motivation for the order of 8 slightly smaller new megaships of their own to be known as the Fantasy class. Like I mentioned earlier, they would not be as posh or elaborate or even as big as the Sovereign class, but it was also not Carnival's intention. Their angle was fun, which surprisingly wasn't just marketed for drunk partiers who like to run around corridors at insatiably late hours of the night, keeping crew way busier than they have to be and keeping other guests annoyed and awake because of it. Not that I've ever had any experiences dealing with that kind of thing, but I know of a few people who have, and I feel their pain. But vacationers of all different types, young and old, even families.
Oh, and me who, if I could, would much prefer Cunard or Princess over Carnival.
And this is where we return to the approachability factor. I like ships, but not cruise ships. Carnival Ecstasy is docked behind Queen Mary all the time. She doesn't look so bad. Wow, wait, what? I can almost afford to actually cruise aboard that ship? You know what? Carnival is pretty cool. While the Holiday class was a feat for Carnival, with some really cool and innovative features that deserves its own video altogether, it was the Fantasy class that would really put Carnival on the map. And you can really tell how they were like an improved upgrade to these earlier ships. It's kind of adorable. The Fantasy, later surnamed with Carnival Fantasy in 2007 for a more cohesive roll call among the fleet, as well as for better brand recognition I'm sure, was ordered in 1988 in the Helsinki new shipyard in Finland. They soon filed for bankruptcy, which delayed the ship's launch by a year. The ship's godmother was a Mrs. Tellervo Koivisto, wife of the president of Finland. Like the Sovereign-class ships, the Fantasy would be the biggest in the cruise line's fleet, at 855 feet long, 103 feet wide, and 70,367 gross tons. Like the Sovereign of the Seas, the Carnival Fantasy changed the game of cruising forever.
But in a different way.
As far as structurally speaking, there are some features that outdid the Royal Caribbean Sovereign-class ships. Oh, your atrium goes up 5 decks?
How about 7, baby?
Oh, and how about we add a massive dome skylight while we're at it?
You have a measly 63 balcony cabins? How about 52? Okay, so that's pretty much it.
Though every stateroom did feature a state-of-the-art VCR player, I don't think Sovereign had that in every stateroom. All Fantasy-class ships were also installed with authentic teak decking, which I think really adds some class. During a time when it was customary to take 7-night cruises, the Fantasy would take 3 to 4-night cruises to win over cruise skeptics and just people not into cruising altogether.
And it worked!
The reason why Carnival built 7 more of the same class was not just to outdo Royal Caribbean, but mostly because it worked. The Fantasy class ships were very successful, to the point where even after bigger and better cruise ships succeeded these otherwise dated vessels, they were still wildly popular, even up to this day. Not everyone wants the congestion and at times the gimmicks of the bigger ships that hold well over 6,000 passengers at a time. The Fantasy class ships are still today regarded as some of the largest line of ships in a fleet to be designed at the same time. I like to think of it as an anomaly between cheap bulk manufacturing meeting efficient design and consumer needs. Joseph Farkas let his imagination, yes, that imagination too, certainly the outcome of that imagination, run wild with the design of these, have I already mentioned, very eccentric ships? A little bit of shock, a little bit of wow, a whole lot of oh man, and there's no doubt the interior design of the Fantasy class ships in particular have been met with a lot of mixed reviews. Farkas wanted to be super original, super out of the box.
But like, way out of the box.
All 8 of the Fantasy class ships are almost 100% identical to one another, until their extensive renovation between 2008 to 2014 modified each one pretty drastically in some areas. Despite the almost mirrored similarities, each room on each ship is very uniquely different, and the theme of each ship are also very uniquely different, cohesively carried throughout the entire ship. I try to make designs so that people on board will experience things they just don't experience in their real life. I think that creates interest, and I try to put in a wide range of design feelings throughout the ship so that people will be constantly discovering. It is like going to some interesting, fantastic place that you have never seen before. You might travel to some places that you are used to going to and you might enjoy it very much. But when you go someplace that you have never been before, and it is interesting, and it is exciting, it creates a kind of feeling that you don't get in the former situation. That is what I am going for. It was also Farkas's goal to make it so that each space could serve a multifunctioning purpose, which I think has also helped them to stay around for so long. For the first of the fantasy class, the Fantasy herself, the theme was titled Mystic Muse. The feeling of being in Las Vegas really was intended for this ship, and appropriately so, as it was the namesake of the line. It's said that the first to revolutionize is also the first to go. On Carnival Ecstasy, debuted in 1991, each room reflects a kind of night on the town vibe from different places around the world, specifically New York. The Ecstasy was one of the fantasy class ships to receive extra features, like a water park, mini golf courses, adult-only Serenity areas, new dining venues, in Carnival's $250 million Evolution of Fun renovation program, which started in 2008. Ecstasy was only 1 out of 5, however, to receive the extra balconies. While not altogether sightly, it proved very marketable. They were all initially built with 52 balcony cabins. After the refits, they gained a total of 158 new balcony cabins, except for the Elation and Paradise, which gained suites on the topmost part of the ship above the spa and fitness centers, adding 184 balcony staterooms in total, which, like I mentioned before, I think actually contemporizes the classic meets modern very nicely. Carnival Sensation 1993 was themed after stimulating the 5 senses. After her massive refit in 2009, the Tropic Resort trope was especially enforced, namely in the upper pool area. She also gained 104 extra balconies during the Evolution of Fun refit. Carnival Fascination 1994 was the first ship to serve cruises out of New York. The theme? Salute to Hollywood, with public rooms named after famous movies and places related to the movie industry. She is the 4th in 2020 to leave the fleet. Debuted in 1995, Carnival Imagination's theme was Legendary Symbols of Antiquity, showcasing ancient wonders, myths, and architecture from around the world. She took over for Paradise in Long Beach, and I was always excited to see her on my way to Los Angeles when I could. She is the 2nd to leave the fleet along with her co-worker, Carnival Inspiration, 1995 as well, which is, or was, a ship that was all about the arts. Art Nouveau, to be exact. The Inspiration also took over Paradise's itinerary in Long Beach. I actually planned on sailing on one of them, which made it a real shock when I found out that these 2 ships were some of the first to be ordered for scrap. Carnival Elation 1998 was decorated in a way that celebrated the arts and literary characters. I actually got the opportunity to visit the ship while she was docked in San Diego back in 2009, and I wasn't too keen on the itineraries, the color scheme of which reminded me of a glossy brown beetle. But I've come to find that she is a favorite of the fantasy class to many cruisers, and I definitely cannot blame them. Her interiors are particularly colorful and eclectic, and the peaceful nature of San Diego really brought out her highlights for me.
Man, I miss San Diego.
Carnival Paradise 1998 was themed after the great ocean liners of the past, or Ships of the World as it was titled. Carnival Paradise is not my favorite of the class just because it was the one I sailed on, but also because of this theme. How could it not be? And how could it not be for you too, dang it? She was the last in the series and was the first non-smoking cruise ship ever to sail the high seas, which didn't last very long, by the way. Each room is named and themed after a classic ocean liner that made significant impacts culturally, in the groundbreaking advancements of technology, as well as style. And so it was really a privilege that this was the ship I would get to have my first cruise on. Do you know what it's like to be in the Queen Mary Lounge while looking directly at the original Queen Mary? Fond memories, very fond memories indeed.
Like mentioned before, the overall structure of both the interior and exterior were virtually carbon copies.
Again, what made each ship slightly different was the decor and the major refits in the late 2000s when balconies
We're adding 98 balconies to the ship.
and water slides and various other amenities were altered and added.
Like I did in my Royal Caribbean Sovereign class tribute video,
we are going to begin our tour where you first enter the ship, the atrium. The stunning 7-deck high atrium.
See, I told you the atrium was awesome.
Look at this. This is cool. Look.
The first 4 decks, titled class-wide as Riviera, Main, and Upper Deck, are full of the mostly ocean view and interior staterooms, as well as the original in-hull suite-size balconies. Again, a very unique and original concept. On Empress Deck, Deck 7, I mentioned in my Sovereign class video what an impact the Carnival Paradise's atrium had on me on my first cruise.
And I'm down here on Empress Deck. Now this is where our guests first enter the ship. It's also where they meet to go ashore or relax or just sit and people watch.
The entrance, which expands the full width of the ship, includes a piano, elevators, a small bar, the shore excursions and guest services desk, and the art and photo gallery, where photos taken are available for purchase. Dad and I purchased one on our cruise along with a photo book that came with this really beautiful glossed image of the Paradise, sparkling in all her animated glory during the inspiring dusk hours right before sunset. And if this all sounds familiar to you, it's because it is. The Sovereign class and the Fantasy class had very similar concepts, although the design itself was very different. I don't know if Royal Caribbean or Carnival stole from one another, but there's no doubt they had similar ideas, and competitive ones at that. Empress Deck is also where there at least was potential access to the bow. I was surprised when I found the doors open and accessible and free to roam while visiting the Elation back in 2009, and of course it was a really cool experience. Anyone else found the doors open and available on their fun ship cruise? Let me know in the comments. Take the stairs or the elevators or the atrium stairs or elevators to Atlantic Deck and you're met with the piano bar on the port side and the library on the starboard side. Very peaceful places to go when wanting to get away from the dizzying Las Vegas style atmospheres, and I have fond memories in both of them. Forward is the conference room, the fun shops, where I purchased this silver medallion thing rather than, oh, I don't know, a ship model? And the 2-deck high main lounge where all the live Las Vegas style performances, game shows, muster drills, bingo tournaments, and special guest speakers are held. Again, I love the huge and whimsical shaped windows that look great both inside and out, something you don't get on a lot of cruise ships, which are very often void of any windows. Amidship and at the stern are the 2 dining rooms, often named after other Carnival Cruise Line ships and reminiscent of ocean liner configurations of old. Queen Mary, anyone? I particularly like the small veranda deck that provided for me a cozy getaway, especially at night. It reminded me of the old pre-post Edwardian era promenade decks aboard the liners of the past, which made sense while aboard the ocean liner themed Paradise. Promenade deck is the main hub of activity aboard. Carnival Boulevard creates an entryway to the major public spaces, much like a boulevard would. Ah, I see what they did there. I like how they incorporated a kind of modern-day promenade deck like what you would see on classic ocean liners of the past. Kind of. Actually, I recently discovered that the traditional glass-enclosed promenade decks aboard the Canadian Pacific Ocean Liners Carnival Repurposed are what inspired this feature on not just the Fantasy class, but many future Carnival ships as well, all the way up to the Carnival Splendor. I always loved this long, breathable space. The huge windows where you can see out for the majority of the length of the ship, and the embossed corners that allow you to see both forward and aft at any given time. It's just a charming and memorable feature. Past the second floor of the main lounge was another photo gallery, some of the teen amenities aboard like Club O2, originally a sushi bar, and the humongous casino, several open bars, a little cafe that even back in 2005 charged you extra, 2 dance clubs, and a sort of cabaret lounge aft with a large bar and where events like karaoke was held. I really appreciate the big windows that invite the view inside, and especially the view of the Queen Mary, while docked in Long Beach anyway. This is also where the smaller getaway pools were at the stern that later became adults-only Serenity on many of the ships after the extensive refits. Lido Deck is where the bridge is located and where the almost wraparound boat deck is. The Fantasy class ships were the last to have lifeboats on the upper superstructure like classic ocean liners of the past did, and a feature I found very charming. If only it was wraparound. While the extended portion of the whole midship is really nice, I think it was one of the reasons why the boat deck was so void of people so much of the time. Which does have its benefits. I love how crowded and loud the pool Lido will get until you open the very heavy doors to just about absolute peace and quiet. It's amazing how intimate and private it can feel if you venture out into it, especially the forward portion. Speaking of pool Lido, the Lido arrangements were not as elaborate as those on the Sovereign class ships. They have one saltwater pool, 2 pool bars, and a pretty generously sized stage. The aft Lido buffet in the back extends to the pool, and when I got to visit the Paradise again a few years later in 2011, there was a stir-fry option that, when I think about it, I can still taste today. It was so good. Speaking of the Lido buffet, there are a lot of things I really like about it. The 180-degree view of the outside world with beautiful floor-to-ceiling windows, especially the shapely veranda windows at the stern looking aft, as well as the patio option outside. It's strange to think that you don't get this quirky configuration anymore, which I think really added to the wow, I'm on a ship factor. On more modern ships they are usually much bigger, but also much more squared and kind of dull, and while there are some great opportunities for views, it tends to be a little plain, though there are exceptions. Then there is the veranda deck, where you have the open-aired observation deck looking at the bow as well as aft on either side of the bridge wings. Here are also the greatest features of the time at least, the balcony cabins, 8 of which are deemed obstructive lifeboat views. Here, 20 lifeboats are hoisted, while the upper portions of the Lido deck travels all the way aft to a generously sized tanning deck, as well as a small pool meant for the kids that have since been updated to Carnival waterworks. And finally, we reach the sports deck, which holds the fitness center and spa Carnival, as well as the topmost portion of the atrium and the very quintessential view of the pool and the signature whale tail funnel, a perfect spot for selfies and family photos. At one time, the small deck at the base of the funnel offered nude sunbathing during certain hours of the day, while at other times of the day gave guests a fun opportunity to be up close and personal with the iconic whale tail funnel and now the slide entrance to Carnival waterworks. And finally, what was once the sun deck has now become, on the remaining Fantasy class ships, the Grand Deck, where 36 more staterooms were added to Elation and Paradise, most of them balconies and 4 of them suites, which is then followed by the top glass dome covering the atrium and a small mini golf course. Originally, when it was just the sun deck, the actual jogging track was located here. This was such a cool deck.
This is the sun deck.
Great name, huh? 10 times around this jogging track is almost a mile.
Especially on the first night of sailing. I loved looking all around and seeing nothing but ocean.
By the next
few hours,
we were steaming west from the coast of
California,
with nothing out ahead of us but ocean.
Carnival Fantasy first operated out of the Port of Miami, then switched to Port Canaveral, which I used to pronounce as Port Canaveral, in 1993, New Orleans in 2006. In 2008, the ship spent a lot of time in dry dock, followed by Mobile, Alabama, for pretty much the rest of her career. Each of the 8 Fantasy class ships have a long history with so many stories to tell, and YouTube is chock full of them. Some stories are really touching, like the ones about the relief efforts after Hurricane Katrina. Some not so great, however, including missing people, deaths, and a fire. In 1998, while the Carnival Ecstasy sailed out of Miami, a fire started in the ship's laundry room, charring the entire stern section of the ship, but injuring no one. These ships were part of a movement of sorts that showed just how far you could go manufacturing so many of the same ship and being successful doing it. They also showed how flexible itineraries could be and won over a lot of skeptical land lovers. But like any ship, they really started to show their age around the time I took my first cruise, as balconies and other modern amenities on cruise ships became commonplace. So why have they stood around for so long? Why did Carnival spend $250 million to refurbish them? Why were they continual moneymakers with so many fans and well-wishers over the years? Especially when so many bigger and better ships have become available to us. Why are we so sad to see half of the fleet in this line go so soon? From the affordability factor to the no-frills simplicity and intimacy, I'd say these ships had a very good run, and continue to. I grew up while these ships were still considered normal-sized cruise ships, It's strange to see them deemed as the smaller ships today, since they have everything you still need for a vacation. Sunning on the deck, relaxing with the book. And are like, still big when you think about it. 2,600 people are still 2,600 people, and standing right beside one, it's still a lot to take in. While some of the problems I faced on my cruise, like the apparent lack of ventilation.
Unfortunately for non-smokers, the smoke from the casino drifts into the Inspiration Promenade, making it hard to escape.
Cigarette smoke and all kinds of leathery Las Vegas-y smells gave me some lasting headaches. There were still a lot of really good and long-lasting memories that I had as well. Strange how that works. Including the crazy bright lights and bright, dare I say, tacky decor, I think what still draws me to these ships is, again, strangely enough, the tacky decor and strange and unique smells. But also, and probably more so, the thoughtful and adventurous layout, spacious open decks, and the classy and quirky exterior design. They really feel like ships to me, which I have a hard time saying for some of the modern ships of today that look like stacked and even top-heavy apartment buildings. And I've come to find that the supply and demand factor really plays a part in it, prioritizing capacity over style and design, at least on the outside and on the strangely cramped decks. But that's for another video. And I'm looking at you, Norwegian Getaway. Okay, so I'm picking on him a little bit.
In the end, Carnival Cruise Lines does a good job of being affordable, approachable, and fun. Like a root beer float, it tastes pretty good and you get what you pay for. And what you pay for is good. I am of a positive opinion that say that these ships look both animated and are the perfect combination between retro new meets classic. For someone who couldn't afford even the most basic of cruises, Carnival Cruise Line's Fantasy Class Fun Ships gave me that opportunity, gave me that experience, and I know it gave that experience for so many others in my position. And I got to live it out on my first cruise aboard the Paradise, which I'll never forget, as well as that special visit that I got to have on the Elation, which I will also never forget. And just maybe that's the big reason why it's so hard for so many to see these ships go, including myself. They're cool, quirky, maybe a little tacky, but they are the Fantasy Class Fun Ships. Are there any special memories you'd like to share? Were you part of any of the crazy experiences that these ships faced throughout their life? Do you plan on cruising on any of the remaining ships in the future? Like the Paradise, for example? What do you like and dislike about them? And perhaps most importantly, are you sad to see them go? Do me a favor and let me know in the comments. Press that like button if indeed you like this video, and subscribe to support my channel and for future videos on very similar subject matters. In the meantime, my name is Matthew, and I will see all you lovely seagoing passengers on the next voyage.
Where is this? Oh, I pressed record again, don't I?
But there's... Oh, you vape.
And we'll see where that medallion thing even went. It seriously cannot be that far away.
I'm of a positive opinion that says that these ships look both fun, both animated, and what was the other one? I'm of a positive opinion that says that these ships look both animated and the perfect combination between old and classic. Wait, that's the same thing. And cut.
Looks like we're moving, yes, but the truth is we're not. Well, actually we are.